You ever get that feeling? Like you're scrolling and scrolling, tons of articles, but nothing really sticks.
Yeah, information overload.
Totally. So today, we're going deep on something you can actually use. Self-defense.
Practical stuff.
Exactly. And forget those crazy movie fights, all that choreography. We're looking at how martial arts principles work.
Okay, interesting.
Specifically, this idea of pressure points, nerve centers, how to use them for real self-defense without needing to be a martial arts master. We've got this awesome guide as our source, really cuts through the BS.
Love that. No BS.
Right. So our mission today is simple. What actually works? What's myth? And how can you, the listener, get those key takeaways fast?
So like actionable stuff right off the bat.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so diving into this guide, the first thing that struck me was it redefines self-defense.
In what way?
It's not about being some kind of warrior out for revenge. It's not about mastering an ancient art. And it's definitely not like those ridiculous brawls you see on screen.
Yeah, those are so over the top.
Totally. This guide brings it down to earth. It's more like, think of having a fire extinguisher.
Okay, I see. Preparation.
Yes. It's about being prepared,
Yeah.
reducing your chances of being attacked in the first place.
Makes sense.
And then, if there's absolutely no other option, knowing how to respond physically, but doing it effectively.
Right, so it's not just about fighting back, it's about having that option, but also preventing things from getting to that point.
You got it. Shifting from potential victim to someone who can act appropriately, of course.
Which is a huge point this guide brings up. A lot of times, people who become victims, it's not that they physically couldn't have done something.
It's mental.
Yeah, they just weren't prepared mentally.
Yeah.
Or they never learned even basic strategies for those high-pressure moments.
That's powerful. And this guy doesn't expect you to be some black belt overnight.
Right, that's intimidating for a lot of people.
It is. And it challenges this whole idea that you got to train for years and years to be effective at self-defense.
Yeah, like some kind of master.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For a lot of us, just knowing a few core principles, a few good moves, that's way more realistic.
More attainable, for sure.
Definitely. And this leads to another crucial part. Self-defense has limits. This guide is really clear about that.
Yeah.
It's about using the minimum force necessary to stop an attack, get away, prevent something worse from happening. It's not a free pass to go all out on someone.
Right, not about revenge.
Not at all. It's about being proportional to the threat.
Which makes sense if you think about it. Not every situation is life or death. Right.
Exactly. The guide talks about this spectrum of threats, from like annoying harassment to serious, dangerous situations. And you need to be able to respond accordingly.
I like that. A range of responses, not just freeze up or go all out.
Totally. Because freezing up, that can make things worse.
Yeah.
But overreacting to like a minor thing, that's not good either. So ethical self-defense, according to this guide, is about having the right response no matter what you face.
Prepared for anything. And that's where these pressure points and nerve centers come in.
You got it. But before we go there, the guide uses those terms, nerve centers and pressure points.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember those aren't like official scientific terms.
More like common language.
Yeah, exactly. Think of nerve center like this. It's a spot on your body that's really sensitive because there are a lot of nerves close to the surface.
So like the shin,
Perfect example. Kick someone in the shin, it hurts.
big time.
Right. So many nerves there. But not every place with lots of nerves is that sensitive to pain. The guide mentions this too.
Like what?
Well, your backside. Plenty of nerves, but not really a prime target for causing pain in a self-defense situation.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then pressure points.
Nah.
In the way this guide uses it, it means a spot where you can cause either an injury or some really intense pain that basically stops someone, like incapacitates them.
So strategic points, what would be an example?
The windpipe. Classic pressure point.
Yeah. Can't breathe, can't fight.
Exactly. Now, here's something cool to think about. A lot of martial arts developed way before we understood the human body the way we do now. Like how nerves work, how pain signals travel.
Ancient techniques.
Right. The guide even says that back in the day, people had these wild ideas, like they thought things like muscle spasms were caused by little reptile spirits moving around inside us.
Reptile spirits.
I know, right? Crazy. But the point is, just because something's old doesn't mean it's accurate.
Tradition versus science.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And our knowledge of the human body has come a long way.
True. So the takeaway here is,
If you really want to understand self-defense, Knowing a bit of anatomy and physiology is super helpful.
Makes you a more informed student, for sure. And the guide is especially strong on this if you're thinking about teaching self-defense.
Oh, absolutely.
It emphasizes that responsibility. You got to base what you teach on solid knowledge, not just like outdated ideas.
So important. There are a ton of myths out there, and education is the key to busting them. The guide even suggests checking out anatomy books, physiology courses, that kind of thing.
Good stuff.
Okay, let's zoom out a little. What about martial arts as a whole? The guide explains it's a really broad term. Covers all sorts of fighting styles, weapons or no weapons.
Right. I've always wondered about that.
Originally, it just meant any fighting skill used in combat. Didn't matter where it came from.
Interesting.
So things like fencing, wrestling, boxing, even archery. All martial arts in that sense, not just the Asian styles people often think of.
That's a good point.
And even with the tons of different styles out there, especially for weaponless fighting, the guide points out they all kind of draw from a few main techniques.
Like what?
Grappling, joint locks, throws, takedowns, hand strikes, foot strikes, that kind of stuff.
Okay, of course.
Yeah. And this ties back to what we're talking about. Hitting those nerve centers, pressure points. That's a technique you see across a bunch of styles. Karate, kung fu, jiu-jitsu. There's even this specific Japanese term, atemiwaza, which is all about those kinds of strikes.
Atemiwaza. Gotta remember that.
Right. But the guide does point out how people kind of use terms like martial arts, karate, kung fu, judo, almost interchangeably, like they all mean the same thing.
Yeah, I've definitely been guilty of that.
So if you want to be more precise, get a clearer picture of how these different disciplines fit together. The guide actually recommends looking up a recent edition of the Encyclopedia Americana.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, now let's shift gears a bit and talk about pain. Specifically, pain in self-defense. Because the guide really emphasizes this. Pain isn't just something you do to someone.
Meaning?
It's a two-way street. There's the stimulus, like a strike, and then there's how the person reacts to it, their individual response.
Oh, like pain tolerance.
Yes. And that can vary so much. Think about going to the dentist. Some people chill, others are terrified.
Oh, yeah. Big difference.
Right. Same with getting a shot. Some hardly feel it, others are in agony. And the guide points out something really fascinating here. Psychology plays a huge GE role.
How so?
Well, imagine someone who's already scared of violence.
Yeah.
They're going to feel pain way more intensely than someone who's, say, got a higher pain tolerance or is just more mentally tough.
So their emotional state matters.
A ton. The guide even compares combat training, where the focus is often on causing as much pain as possible to win.
Right, disabling your opponent.
Versus self-defense, where pain is just one piece of the puzzle. Understanding the psychology, the interaction between attacker and defender, that's huge.
Because in self-defense, it's not really about winning a fight like it's some competition.
Exactly. It's not a sport. The goal is to survive, get away safely. Sometimes the level of pain you need to inflict is just enough to make the attacker realize, hey, this person's not an easy target. I'm out of here.
Not worth the trouble.
Right. The guide even points out that sometimes the best self-defense doesn't involve pain or physical stuff at all.
Clearly.
Yeah. Think about it. Staying calm, projecting confidence, refusing to be a victim, that can be more powerful than any punch or kick.
I never thought of it that way. So, like, your attitude can actually deter an attack.
Absolutely. It's about sending the message, I'm not an easy target, don't mess with me.
That's powerful.
It is. So the key takeaway is this. Being able to calm things down without force and knowing how to use appropriate force when you have to, those are both valuable skills.
Having a whole range of options.
Exactly. Okay, now for the fun part. Let's talk about those legendary deadly blows. The guide spends a good chunk of time on this.
Debunking the myths.
Oh, yeah. You know those stories we hear, those movie scenes about secret techniques that can kill you with one touch or make you die years later?
The stuff of legends.
Totally. And the guy goes right into some specific examples, like that classic one. Reach into someone's chest, rip out their heart.
Oh, come on.
I know, right? Or pulling out someone's spine. Or instant death with just a touch. Or the 7-year death where you get hit and then boom, 7 years later you're dead.
Pure fiction, right.
Pretty much. The guide really breaks down why this stuff is anatomically impossible.
Okay, I'm curious.
Well, take that nasal bone myth, the one where you hit someone up under the nose and it drives the bone into their brain, killing them.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
Total nonsense. First of all, most of your nose is cartilage, not even bone, and those nasal bones, pretty fragile compared to the rest of your skull.
So more likely to break than anything.
Exactly. Plus, there's literally no way for those bones to get into your brain. The only openings up there are tiny channels for nerves and blood vessels.
So a hard hit to the nose.
It'll hurt like hell, might break your nose, could even cause a concussion, but it's not going to be from bones going into your brain.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Right. The guide then goes into these legendary tales of, like, superhuman feats. And it acknowledges that every culture has its myths, its heroes.
Inspiring stories.
Yeah, but the danger is when we start taking them literally, like actual, factual accounts. You got to be critical, question what you hear.
Otherwise you get lost in fantasyland.
Exactly. So enjoy those stories, appreciate the folklore, but don't mistake them for real-world self-defense. The guide even says, keep those tales in the realm of myth and legend.
Okay, but what about the touch of death? Is there any truth to that?
Not a chance. The guide flat out calls it fiction. No one with this magical power has ever been proven to exist. It's purely for entertainment.
And what about the 7-year death, where someone hits you and you die years later?
The guide addresses that too. It says, yeah, as a real fight, you could get an internal injury that might cause problems down the line, maybe even lead to death eventually.
But that's not intentional.
Exactly. It's an unintended consequence. The 7-year death implies this specific magical blow that's meant to kill you later. And there's just zero evidence for that.
So no mystical death punches.
Nope. The guide's conclusion is pretty straightforward. There's no secret formula for a deadly blow. Anyone who can hit hard enough in the right spot can cause serious damage, even death. Doesn't matter what martial art they practice.
It's about force and vulnerability, not some secret technique.
Exactly. Okay, let's talk about the media for a sec.
How it portrays fighting.
Yeah. The guide reminds us that movies, TV, all that entertainment stuff, it's not meant to teach us real self-defense.
Makes sense. It's about telling a story.
Right. But the guide also says, don't believe everything you see in the news either. News outlets love reporting on weird or dramatic events, but they don't always fact-check everything properly.
Oh, so take it with a grain of salt.
Definitely. The guide gives this example. Remember that story that went around about a woman knocking a guy unconscious by pressing on his armpits?
Likely.
People were calling it this amazing new self-defense technique, but the guide completely debunks it.
Really?
Think about it. When someone's attacking you, they're usually super stressed, anxious.
Full of adrenaline.
Right. So it's actually pretty common for them to, like, have a meltdown, start crying, even run away suddenly when you resist.
Oh, so maybe the guy just fainted from stress.
Most likely. Not some magical armpit pressure point.
Interesting. So media hype versus reality.
Exactly. Okay, let's get into something you might not expect. Hand conditioning.
Like making your hands tougher.
Yeah. The guide straight up says it's not needed for sport karate, jiu-jitsu, or self-defense. And it's totally irrelevant to judo.
I never thought about that. Why not?
Well, in sport karate, a lot of times there's no contact at all, or people wear gloves. And in judo, you don't strike at all.
Makes sense.
Right. So, hand conditioning. It was important in old school karate.
Why is that?
Back in feudal Japan, sometimes they had to break through samurai armor. Hardened hands and feet were essential.
But we don't really fight in armor anymore.
Exactly. And the guide points out that nowadays there's just no reason to hit things that'll hurt your normal unconditioned hands in a self-defense situation.
So, like, don't punch a brick wall.
Pretty much. Plus, knowing where to hit is key. Like, don't aim for the collarbone, that's going to hurt you more. But if you target the knee, the nose, you could do real damage without needing super tough hands.
Oh, that makes sense. Force directed at the right spot.
You got it. The guide even lists a bunch of downsides to heavy hand conditioning. You can get permanent injuries, mess up your fine motor skills.
Like if you need to do delicate work with your hands.
Right. Plus, imagine having all these calluses, deformed hands. Not exactly a good look in a lot of jobs.
True, and socially too.
Totally. And there's the legal angle. If you've got those super tough hands, the police might think you're like some kind of trained fighter.
Could make it harder to claim self-defense.
Exactly. The guy's basically saying hand conditioning is only really useful if you're into stunts, like breaking boards.
Okay, so for most people, not worth it.
Not really. Now, let's talk about how the guide describes the effects of different strikes. It tries to be accurate, of course, but it also recognizes that predicting the exact outcome of a blow is super complicated.
Yeah, a lot of variables at play.
Right. The guide points out all these factors you'd need to consider scientifically. The force of the impact, the exact spot you hit, the angle.
The person's health, their pain tolerance.
Exactly. It's impossible to account for all that in a real fight. So the guide uses words like possible and probable to talk about effects.
Okay, that makes sense.
Possible means there's a chance of it happening. Probable means it's more likely based on what we know.
So it's about likelihood, not certainty.
Right. And the guide stresses that things like the person's health, their emotional state at the time, the force of the blow, those can make a huge difference.
Like the same strike could have totally different effects depending on who it hits.
Absolutely. The guide even uses this example. Imagine hitting someone in the solar plexus.
Okay, soft spot below the ribs.
Right. Now, if you hit a big, muscular person there, it might not do much.
But a smaller person.
Could be a knockout.
So size matters.
It definitely plays a role, and this is where the guide gets super practical. It breaks down the likely effects of strikes based on size differences.
Oh, interesting.
3 categories. Opponents of equal size, larger hitting smaller, and smaller hitting larger.
Okay, I'm following.
Let's say you do an open hand slash to the nose.
Ouch.
Against someone your size, it might cause pain, bleeding, maybe some disorientation.
But a bigger person hitting a smaller person?
Much higher chance of serious injury, broken nose, concussion, that kind of thing.
And the other way around.
Smaller person hitting a bigger one. Probably less effective, maybe some pain, but less chance of real damage.
So the same technique has different outcomes depending on size.
Exactly. The guide gives other examples too, like an edge of hand blow to the side of the neck.
Dangerous area.
It is. A bigger person hitting a smaller person there, the chances of knockout, artery damage, all that, way higher. And a knuckle blow to the solar plexus. Same idea.
Makes sense.
But then the guide shifts to these really practical techniques that don't rely on pure strength as much, perfect for smaller people defending themselves.
Like what?
Kicking the knee, the shin. Those are prime examples.
Yeah, those hurt.
They do. And the cool thing is, even though the exact amount of pain might vary a bit depending on size,
The key is you can keep your distance.
you got it. You're
Yeah.
out of reach of their punches.
Yeah.
The guide shows how this works in all 3 size scenarios, and it contrasts that with, say, hitting the base of the neck.
Which is riskier.
Way riskier, especially if you're smaller going against someone bigger.
Okay, so smart target selection is key.
Absolutely. Before we get into specific nerve centers, let's talk about those awesome movie fight scenes for a sec.
Always fun to watch.
Totally. But the guide reminds us that they're nothing like real fights.
I mean, yeah, they're choreographed.
Right. No matter how good the actors are at martial arts, it's all scripted, rehearsed, filmed from multiple angles to look cool.
Sound effects, slow motion, all that stuff.
Exactly. They use trampolines to make jumps higher, stunt doubles for dangerous moves. It's all about entertainment, not reality.
So don't try that at home, folks.
Seriously. Okay, now let's get into the nitty-gritty. The guide goes through a whole bunch of nerve centers and pressure points, really detailed. And as we talk about each one, let's keep in mind how size can affect the outcome.
Sounds good.
First up, the temple. Now, a lot of people think it's vulnerable because the bone's thinner there.
Right, like a weak spot.
But the guide clarifies it's actually about the shape of the bone. The temple's flat, so it transmits force to the brain more easily.
Like a shockwave.
Yeah. And any really hard blow to the head, temple included, can be fatal.
So it's not just about hitting the weakest point, it's understanding how force travels through the body.
Exactly. Now, imagine hitting someone's temple. If you're both the same size, a moderate blow might stun them, cause pain, maybe make them feel kind of dazed. Against a smaller person, same blow could knock them unconscious, even cause brain damage. But if you're smaller, hitting a bigger person,
Less likely to have a huge impact.
right, might startle them, but probably not going to cause serious injury with one hit.
Okay, so technique and placement are key.
Definitely. And for the temples, some effective techniques are a heel of palm strike, a slashing hand strike, hammer fist, or elbow, especially from behind.
Gotcha.
Next up, the nose. The guide breaks it down into the top and the side.
Makes sense. Different angles.
Right, the top of the nose. Easy target. Even a moderate hit causes pain, disorientation. And while a bloody nose isn't usually serious, it can really freak someone out.
Yeah, psychological effect.
Totally. So against someone your size, moderate blow equals pain, maybe bleeding. A heavier blow could even separate the cartilage, smaller person. Even a moderate hit can cause a lot of pain, mess them up. Forceful blow could break the nose, separate cartilage.
And smaller person hitting a bigger one?
Moderate blow, probably just pain. Heavy blow might cause bleeding, but less likely to do lasting damage.
Got it. So what are good techniques for the top of the nose?
Hammer fist, edge of hand strike, open hand slash, closed hand hammer. Those are all effective.
Lots of options.
Now, the side of the nose. This is good if someone's behind you. Light hit can distract. Moderate hit causes pain, maybe bleeding, dislodged cartilage.
And really hard hit.
Could break the nose. But again, size matters. Against a smaller person, a moderate or heavy blow to the side of the nose is likely to cause a lot of pain, disorientation, bleeding. Could even dislocate or fracture the cartilage or bone.
Ooh.
Right. But against a bigger person, it's more about distraction, causing momentary confusion. Even a hard blow might just cause bleeding or separated cartilage. Not as much risk as serious injury for them.
Makes sense.
Okay, now this one's kind of sneaky, hitting up under the nose. Lower risk of injuring yourself, which is good if you're smaller going in someone bigger.
Interesting tactic.
Moderate hit causes pain, distraction, maybe bleeding. Heavy hit could fracture the bone there, or separate cartilage. Against a smaller person, moderate blow could cause bleeding, cartilage problems. Heavy blow could actually fracture that bone. But against a bigger person, moderate blow is more about distraction, causing pain. Heavy blow might draw blood, but less likely to do real damage.
So situational awareness is key.
Totally. Effective techniques for this spot are heel of palm strike, slashing hand strike, and from behind, a slash or an elbow.
Got it.
Now, the eyes. This is a super high-risk target. The guide's really clear about this. Only use it if you're in a life-or-death situation where nothing else will work.
Yeah, eyes are delicate.
Even the slightest touch can cause permanent damage. No excuse for going for the eyes if you can stop the threat in another way. And the thing is, size doesn't matter as much here. Poking, clawing, stabbing at the eyes, that can cause blindness no matter who's doing it.
So use extreme caution with that one.
Absolutely. Moving on. The chin. This is a great target, especially for a smaller person up close. A good hit to the chin can snap the head back, cause a knockout, especially if it's hard enough.
Like a boxer's punch.
Exactly. Against someone your size, a moderate hit can make them lose balance, cause pain. Heavy hit could knock them out, maybe even injure their teeth or jaw. Smaller person, same idea, but easier to cause serious damage. Bigger person, harder to knock out, but a good hit can still mess with their balance. And the most effective technique for the chin, an upward heel of palm strike.
Got it.
Now, striking the ear. This is something you see in some older martial arts styles, but the guide isn't a big fan of it for modern self-defense, especially if you're smaller.
Why is that?
Well, against a smaller person, you could actually damage their hearing. And then against a bigger person, it's just not that effective. Plus, it's not easy to hit accurately in a real fight.
Okay, makes sense.
But there's this spot just under the ear, a little hollow. Pressing there with your thumb or knuckle can cause a lot of pain. And the guide says this works pretty much the same whether you're bigger or smaller than the other person.
Interesting. So more of a pressure point than a striking target.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the windpipe. Super dangerous area. Only go for this if you're in a truly awful situation where it's literally fight or die.
Life or death.
Right. Even a moderate blow to the windpipe can cause excruciating pain, will make it hard to breathe, could even be fatal. And against a smaller person, that risk of fatality is even higher. If you absolutely have to hit this area, an edge of hand slash or a forearm blow at close range could work. But even pressing on the windpipe is risky. A little pressure causes pain, but a lot of pressure could crush it, cause strangulation.
Yeah.
Not good.
Definitely a last resort.
For sure. The guide also points out that there's this nerve cluster right below and under the jawbone. Jabbing or poking there with a knuckle or your fingertips can cause serious pain, and that works pretty much the same regardless of size.
So another good option for pressure or a quick strike.
Exactly. Then there's this hollow in the throat just below the Adam's apple. That's where the trachea is least protected.
Sensitive spot.
Super sensitive. Even light pressure there can push someone away, but hard blows. Huge risk of serious injury. The guide says that using your thumb to apply pressure there can be good for controlling someone who's being a nuisance, but not actually attacking you.
Like a non-lethal control technique.
Yeah. But anything more than that, like heavy pressure, jabs, stabs, that's in the same category as hitting the Adam's apple. Only do it if you're in serious danger.
Got it. High stakes, high risk.
Exactly. Okay, now let's talk about the side of the neck. This is a really good target, practical, and not as dangerous as the windpipe.
Why is that?
It's very sensitive to pain, but you're less likely to cause permanent damage unless you really go all out.
Okay, good to know.
So against someone your size, a moderate blow can cause pain, a harder one can stun them, and a really powerful hit could knock them out. Smaller person, moderate blow might stun, heavy blow could cause knockout, and a super strong blow could be fatal.
And a smaller person hitting a bigger one.
Moderate hit, probably just pain. Harder hit might cause pain and confusion, but a smaller person probably can't hit hard enough to cause real injury there.
So, good target for most situations.
Yeah. An open hand slash is the most effective technique for the side of the neck. The guide also mentions applying pressure to the side of the neck, like a hold that targets the carotid artery.
Choking someone out?
Kinda. It can cause unconsciousness, but it's less likely to cause permanent damage compared to, say, a trachea hold.
But that's more of a trained professional move.
Right. Not something the average person should try.
Got it.
And to be clear, pressing on the front of the throat is super dangerous. Could cause serious, even fatal injury. Avoid that unless it's absolutely the only option.
Noted. So many nuances to this.
There are. Okay, moving on. There's this muscle area where the neck and shoulder meet. Hitting there can be effective. Moderate blow causes pain. Harder one might numb the arm or cause a spasm.
So temporarily disabling.
Yeah. Against a smaller person, moderate blow can cause a lot of pain, maybe even numb the arm. Forceful blow could make that numbness last longer, potentially injure the muscle. Smaller person hitting a bigger person, moderate blow is probably not going to do much, but a hard one could cause pain and briefly disable the arm. Downward open hand slash is good for this target.
Okay.
The collarbone. This was a popular target in older martial arts, but the guide doesn't recommend it much for modern self-defense.
Why is that?